Cheating. It's one thing we as Magic the Gathering players, or most of us anyway, just cannot stand. It happens every day, and makes the game look kind of awful and easy to exploit. Because of this, it makes me wonder why decks like the Show and Tell deck in Legacy have been around for so long. Now, the reason I want to cover the Show and Tell deck today is because even though it's not super popular, at least in the last year, I haven't seen it quite as much in Legacy, it's still a really annoying deck to deal with, especially if you're brand new to the format. For example, if Standard is the only constructed format that you've ever played, this is going to be a big shock to you, considering cheating things into play is not very common in Standard. Usually, if you want to get an effect like this, you usually have to pay a lot more mana in Standard, but for the cost of 3 mana, the Show and Tell deck not only gives your opponent a really large creature, but a creature that you probably wouldn't expect to see in Legacy. For the ever so low cost of 2 and a blue mana, Show and Tell allows each player to put in a permanent from their hand onto the battlefield. While the thought of everyone getting a free permanent may not seem like a bad idea at first, when you realize your opponent has things like Emrakul, Progenitus, Inkwell Leviathan, and other equally as terrifying creatures, then it just kind of becomes a one-sided fight. While mono and blue decks are pretty common, another common version of this deck is the Sneak and Show deck. This is a red-blue version of the deck that not only uses Show and Tell, but also Sneak Attack and occasionally Through the Breach to cheat in these creatures and give them haste and allow them to do a lot of damage. Essentially, if you're able to give Emrakul haste, then it's not going to be pretty, I'll say that much. Although this deck is very popular due to the fact that gets you a really big creature in Legacy that is really hard to get if you played it fair, it's really not too hard to stop. You do have to keep in mind that the deck does like to run several cards that, cheat things into play, especially if you're playing against the Sneak and Show version of this deck. Once you get rid of the Show and Tells or able to stop the Show and Tells, the deck really doesn't have that many ways to win other than actually play the creature, which is likely not going to happen because you're likely going to be a lot faster than if an opponent were to cast a 15 mana creature. In short, the deck is barren of mid-range. It usually doesn't even run any other creatures aside from the big ones it wants to cheat into play. It usually doesn't even run Burn, even though it does have some red sometimes. But the point is, if you're able to prevent your opponent from cheating things into play, then you're golden. There's almost no way they can win. Card sniping cards like Extirpate or Slaughter Games work really well, but you may want to consider trying to get rid of the creatures, because if you get rid of the creatures that the deck wants to cheat into play, then ultimately they'll have nothing to cheat into play. Considering white is the color of balance and order, white obviously has a ton of tools at its disposal to deal with this completely unfair matchup, such as the ever so helpful Legacy staple Containment Priest. Meant to deal with matchups like this, it's pretty awesome, and you won't have to worry about any Emrakuls being dropped on your face. Another thing I should point out in this matchup is while Show and Tell will cheat in a card like Emrakul, you won't get any of the benefits from Emrakul being cast, considering you aren't casting it, you're just dropping it onto the battlefield. Therefore, you won't be able to take the extra turn that it would have provided if you were to cast it. However, sometimes off the Show and Tell, they will attempt to play Omniscience rather than Emrakul itself. This means a whole world of trouble because now they can cast Emrakul for free and get the benefit of an extra turn. This essentially means that you're basically screwed unless you have a really high life total and a very large board state. Considering Emrakul is very hard to get rid of due to its protection from colored spells, you're going to have to choose your removal wisely. You could use board wipes, but those are really heavy in this matchup, and considering the deck could run something like Sneak Attack, a board wipe at sorcery speed may not even matter. The best sorcery speed removal I find in this matchup has to be Council's Judgment. This is because it bypasses Emrakul's protection from colored spells, since it doesn't target. As far as instant speed removal goes, you're going to have to use something that makes them sacrifice a creature. Diabolic Uke is personally my favorite, just because you can play it whenever you like, and don't have to worry about restrictions, like whenever a creature attacks, or whenever something happens, or if you need a certain amount of things for it to work. It just gets the job done right on. As with card sniping cards, taking a card away at the first few turns of the game is stellar. I know I mention Hand Attack in all of my videos, but Hand Attack's really good, especially in high-level formats like Legacy. Counterspells are also nice considering this is a combo deck, and you can just drop a counterspell right on top of their Show and Tell or Sneak Attack, Just remember, though, that the deck does run blue, and therefore they will try to have a counterspell ward over whatever you are trying to do. At times, this deck will run Boseiju to counter a few of these things, so you may want to bring some Wastelands along just in case. If you don't have Wastelands, maybe Ghost Quarters instead. Sadly, due to its nature of speed and random chance, red is probably one of the worst colors to be playing against this matchup. If you are playing a fast, aggressive, fair red deck, it's probably just best to move fast as possible and just cast things as you normally would. If you do play red, it probably is best to splice another color. Like red, green is kind of also in the same boat, although it does have some enchant removal to deal with that sneak attack. If you do play aggressive deck that is red or green, you are going to have to move fast and hope that you can do enough damage in a fair way as well before your opponent manages to attack you with an Emrakul. Oddly enough, I'm surprised not too many people have tried Ensnaring Bridge in this matchup, considering the only real way this deck wins is with attacking with a giant creature. If you somehow prevent that creature from attacking, then this deck has no way to win. Occasionally, you'll see this deck run Progenitus, although Progenitus is really annoying due to its protection from everything clause. Oddly enough, it actually is stopped quite easily by Circle of Protection, which I find quite humorous. Reflecting Palm is also funny because you can use it on creatures with Protection and Shroud. Pretty sweet if I dare say so myself. I'm honestly surprised more people haven't tried this. It's also important to note that you can also beat cheating by cheating yourself. By this, I mean when your opponent casts a Show and Tell, you can put in a permanent that counters the permanent that it would cheat into play. For example, you could use a Reclamation Sage to destroy that Omniscience that they put into play. Or you could use an Ashen Rider to exile that Emrakul that they cheated into play because it's an ability, not a spell. Once you've developed a board state and prevent the initial cheating from happening, all you have to do is basically keep the pressure going. The deck doesn't really have that many ways to block, so it doesn't really matter if your creatures are evasive or not. You just have to keep putting pressure and keep your opponent on the clock. So now that you know what to do, and you know you play against Show and Tell decks at your Legacy events, feel free to follow these strategies, and if you play your cards right, you will slay this beast. I hope this video has been of some help to you. If there's a deck that you are having trouble beating at your sanctioned event, FNM, or other location where you're playing Magic, feel free to let me know about it, and I'll make an episode about how to defeat that deck. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Rhea Spectre, and I'll see you all next time.